Let's dive right into this explainer, where we're breaking down a truly grim, dark fable driven by two incredibly cruel, game-playing spirits. We are unpacking a fascinating piece of source material today that completely dismantles the kinds of stories we're so used to hearing. It's a tale of three mortals who get caught in this quiet, forgotten space between worlds, entirely manipulated by forces way beyond their comprehension. So get comfortable, because we are about to map out one seriously dark descent. Now, the very first thing we need to do here is toss out every traditional storytelling trope you've come to expect. You know the classic hero's journey, right? The call to adventure, gathering a bunch of trusted allies, that triumphant return with some magical boon? Yeah, just throw all of that right out the window. Our source material makes it abundantly clear this is an inverted path. It is absolutely not an ascent into greatness. Actually, it's a rapid, terrifying descent into complete ruin. We're going to follow the literal index found on the Spirit's Living Scroll, which is basically a guaranteed 6-stage roadmap of inevitable failure. We'll be hitting 1. The threshold of refusal. 2. The descent into stolen light. 3. The weighing that devours. 4. The gavel of confession. 5. The playground of spirits. And finally, 6. The unwritten return. To really grasp what's going on in this explainer, we have to talk about the complex engine driving the whole story, the Fichtean dialectic. Now, don't let the heavy philosophical jargon intimidate you. It's actually a brilliant way to frame a conflict. You start with a thesis, right? A starting idea or force. Then you introduce its exact opposite, the antithesis. These two forces smash into each other, and out of all that friction and conflict, a brand new reality is born. That's the synthesis. In our fable, this isn't just some abstract concept. It is the literal mechanism of torture used by our antagonists. And that dynamic perfectly illustrates our thesis and antithesis. We have these two spirits acting as cruel narrators, using their opposing forces to totally manipulate the mortal realm. On one side, we have the spirit of negation. This entity represents the absolute no, wielding this frozen starlight cane. It just wants to stop, to deny, to smother everything. On the other side is its antithesis, the spirit of chaotic becoming. This spirit represents the endless more, constantly shaking a living scroll to rewrite reality with thorns and wild overgrowth. These two aren't trying to help our mortals at all. They're just playing a sick game, and human lives are literally the board they're playing on. Let's move to stage 1, the threshold of refusal. The crucial takeaway here is that instead of a heroic step up, our characters face a steep drop, where their own worst flaws become their only companions. In a normal myth, a hero gets a grand call to adventure. But here, the call is just this unwelcome, harsh exposure to their own sins. Instead of gathering a fellowship of wise helpers, their allies are just their own fatal flaws. The grand ordeal isn't a test of physical strength at all. It's the total, devastating collapse of the lies they've been telling themselves. And the return brings zero magical rewards, just further dissolution into the friction of the spirit's game. This initial parable perfectly captures that threshold of refusal. We have a man whose attempt to avoid reality completely traps him. He literally locks up a box of mirrors because he refuses to let things change. He's screaming no to reality. But, as you might guess, you can't just refuse the truth. By locking the box, his refusal becomes his prison. His face vanishes, and every single door he tries to escape through turns into the very black glass he was trying to hide from. The refusal becomes the threshold itself. The spirits see this and lean in. Negation freezes his cane. Becoming writes thorns across the city. It's a pretty dark reminder that boxing away our flaws usually just traps us inside with them. Which brings us to stage 2, the descent into stolen light. We meet our first mortal victim, the thief. This sequence traces his downfall from a simple act of refusal to total disillusion. The parable here is really striking. The thief thinks he can balance the cosmic scales by replacing a silver coin he stole from a sleeping god. He's trying to hide what he did, right? Refusing the reality of his theft. But the replacement coin grows unnaturally, incredibly heavy. It literally drags him underground to the original glowing coin, which essentially tells him, you can keep what you took, but you can never pretend it was yours. In the physical city, our thief feels this exact same gravitational pull. His hunger for things that can't be stolen drives him deeper into the night, and every handhold dissolves into the very light he once tried to steal. Now on to stage 3, the weighing that devours. Next, we track the market man's inescapable punishment for his absolute excess of falsehoods. This merchant rigged his scales to always favor his own hand, weighing sand against gold and breath against promises. But remember, the spirit of chaotic becoming, that endless more, is actively playing here.
The merchant's massive excess of lies causes the scales to physically grow teeth, which, let's be real, is a deeply terrifying feature for a piece of office equipment, but it's a highly effective punishment. They start chewing the very air carrying his lies. As he tries to run, this glowing, indelible ink climbs his wrists like a living receipt of his debts that just refuses to close, and those scales follow him, literally biting the road to pieces.
Stage 4 takes us to the gavel of confession. Our third pawn is the high judge. Notice how the heavy judgment he cast upon someone else ultimately forces his own confession. The judge sentenced a man to silence simply because the man spoke inconvenient truths. That is an act of pure negation. So in return, his own gavel turns to solid lead. It refuses to rise off the desk until he speaks out loud every corrupt, hidden bargain he's ever made. And when he finally breaks and speaks, he is surrounded by a chasm of mirrors, echoing that black glass from the first threshold. They multiply his voice so that every single echo becomes a verdict against him, and the sheer weight of his own hypocrisy drags him straight down to the earth.
Let's dive into Stage 5, the playground of spirits. This is where we hit the synthesis of our Fichtean dialectic, and the source material gets incredibly profound here. We see the paradoxical nature of the spirit's powers, contrasted perfectly by a single unlit candle. The dark spirit, negation, tries to completely smother the flame, but this absolute no only makes the colors of the flame appear sharper. Meanwhile, the colorful spirit, chaotic becoming, tries to endlessly multiply the flame, but this endless more just makes the surrounding darkness feel that much deeper. So, the mind-blowing point here is that this terrifying friction between refusal and excess is the actual ordeal the mortals are suffering through. This is our synthesis, the thesis of no and the antithesis of more smashed together, and the resulting friction is what literally powers the universe of this story. The spirits realize they haven't planned a grand hero's journey at all. They're just playing. They laugh, and that cruel laughter physically becomes the chaotic weather hurting our broken characters to their doom.
As we map out their chronological descent, it becomes clear how the spirit's game herds these people into one inescapable location. We've got the thief fleeing in the dead of night, the market man running in terror at dawn, the judge being dragged downward by day, and finally, by twilight, they all converge. The source text mentions that apathy and unstable luck washed through the streets, basically pushing these three into a single open square where the night itself is thinning. They didn't choose to meet up. They were orchestrated to arrive there by forces treating them like disposable toys. Which brings us to our final stage, Stage 6, the unwritten return.
There is absolutely no heroic victory here. They merely stand under a thinning sky, entirely consumed by the exact flaws they refuse to acknowledge. Just look at this tragic final accounting. The thief has lost all his stolen light. His hands are completely empty of everything except his insatiable hunger. The market man is forever stained, his hands glowing with the indelible ink of ledgers he can never close. The judge is permanently weighed down by a gavel that will not let him judge another living soul until he finishes judging himself. There's no boon, no healed kingdom. The inverted journey ends exactly where the spirits began it, trapped in that terrible, agonizing space between refusal and excess. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. As these characters walk off into an unwritten page, still descending, still becoming, and still refused, the spirits tilt that starlight cane and shake the living scroll one last time, but they don't record an ending. The night doesn't finish. It just becomes another unwritten page. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we blindly refuse to face our own truths, or when we endlessly hunger for things we haven't earned, aren't we just inviting those exact same forces of negation and chaotic becoming into our own lives? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating grim analysis with me. Take some time to reflect on the inverted paths you might be walking yourself, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.